It's on now, so. Whatever else we say is on YouTube now.
It could have been, it's been a while since we've. Well, it might just look like that there.
Oh, thank you.
Like the clickers and stuff like you set up.
My clicker wasn't working. There it goes. I think the battery's just dead, so now there's no battery. Is it cool enough in here? Is it too cool?
I'm good.
Is that clickers working now?
Battery's dead.
Oh, I had something got said. I was like, I'm not gonna make it.
We are streaming already, so.
You're fine. We can talk. Just they'll
Just be
hear us.
aware.
Whoever's watching can hear us.
Right. We're not doing paper. Andrew told me how to get them in there because that way they'll be in with the whole group and it takes it out to 4 decimal places. So that way, if any of them, are close.
She just didn't want to do math.
I just didn't what?
You just didn't want to do math.
Yeah, I don't blame her. Anything to avoid that. We are streaming.
I guess this is
Wherever you want to. And if you don't want to sit at those tables, you're welcome to move back to these tables. I just put all the computers up there, but you can.
Oh, you're right.
They have a complete judges packet. That's you.
That's what threw me.
I use it that one. No, it doesn't matter. Okay, that's yours. Okay, it has the student ID and then your judge ID. And Lindsay is first,
I need
right?
to put the student ID in.
Lindsay is first. If you need to make what's on your screen smaller, you control minus. If you want to make it bigger, control plus. So if you want to shrink it down so you can see more of it. No, it's not 3:30 yet, but we are streaming.
I was like, oh, you're fine. You're good.
You can move your Chromebooks if you want to. You don't have to sit at this table. If you want to move one of that tables, that's
I
fine.
can't see this stuff. See.
Yeah, you can move anywhere you need to move. Just You can, your Chromebooks are set up here, but you can take them anywhere you need to in the room. Just make yourself comfortable.
Well, let's see our same ID tomorrow night.
No, this is a separate judging ID if you're judging tomorrow night. So this is just for tonight. You'll have a different, and you'll have a different sheet for you tomorrow night too. So these are just for these sessions.
So we just grab one.
You can grab one and move, or you can stay at that table, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. We're sure we could this one. This is her second time. It's like the commercial with the second. Yeah. You've seen it.
You can shower.
Yeah.
That's the word that we
It's like here.
missing one judge still. It's not quite 3:30, and we always start these every 20 minutes on time. We won't start early for the people who are watching the live stream.
Where's the little doodad?
The doodad,
Where's the doodad that is this like video? How do you have it?
the clicker.
No, the video.
Me.
Where's your video?
It's right over here.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Doodad. Don't turn that audio away.
It's on. It's been
I
on.
do use Chromebooks in my classroom a lot. Andrew is usually on standby.
Do I have another? Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. You can, I've got you set up right there by Sherry, but you can move anywhere you want to. If you want to move to another table, you make yourself comfortable, however much elbow room you have. If you don't like the way your screen looks, you can reduce the size of what's on your screen with Control minus. You can increase the size with Control plus. So if you want to see more of the scoring guide or less of the scoring guide. I do want to remind you that they do not see your individual scores. They get a composite judges score in each category, and then they get an overall average score. But if you make comments at the bottom, they will see your name and the comment that you type. But that's the only thing they see that's attached to your name is the comment. They don't ever see a score attached to a certain judge, so. Our first session will be session ID 97, and that's on the sheet that I gave you that has your name on it. So that will have your judge's ID on it. And then the session ID. So Lindsay is session 97. Fun for a minute, and then it came up with the sign-in box, and that's the kiosk is available. And then it was written. Okay, so that first category, visual aids, Andrew just changed it, but it won't show if it's changed on yours. But that's their trifold. And we move that to the top category just so that as they're setting up and you're waiting for them, that you can go ahead and judge the trifold. Yeah.
No, it's not. Oh, there. Okay, we're good. Is it like 3:30?
It is 3:29, and you can go ahead and start.
Okay. Are my judges ready? According to the words sang by Trace Atkins, you're gonna miss this. You're gonna want this back. You're gonna wish these days hadn't gone by so fast. These are some good times, so take a good look around. You may not know this now, but you're gonna miss this. Good afternoon. I am Lindsay Osborne. For my senior project, I wanted to be able to create something that allowed me to preserve the memories that I had made here at Little Springs High School in the last 4 years. I chose to make a t-shirt quilt. I felt that I lacked the knowledge of sewing, and I feel as if sewing is a life skill that not many people my age know how to do. When I started conducting my research, I wanted to research about the history of sewing. So that's my first talking point. When I think of sewing history, the first thing that pops into my mind is the sewing machine. The sewing machine emerged in the late 1850s. This sped up the sewing process for sewing projects for women. Not only was it to speed up projects, but it allowed them to do many other projects in one day. Next would be sewing groups. Women came together once a week and they sewed together. It was a way for them to socialize with each other. If you think of sewing, you probably think of women. It's a woman's only hobby. However, that is not the case. Men have started participating in sewing. For example, in Tennessee, there is a group called the Guy Quilters who spend their week once a week coming together and sewing quilts for veterans as a way to give back. There are many benefits that come along with sewing that you probably do not realize, such as rehab after medical procedures. Rehab after medical procedures means that sewing is a good way to be used as therapy after surgery. We live in a fast-paced world, so sometimes it's hard to slow down and make sure that you have a full recovering process after surgery. Next would be making connections. After many years, people have had professions where they're not coming in contact with enough people, so they're very isolated. For example, truck drivers. They will spend many hours out on the road not coming into contact with people unless they stop. One man, he stops frequently, and he stops at quilting shops in nearby cities. This is a great way for him to get out and communicate with people who share the same passion as him, which is sewing. And then lastly, life events. There have been many life events that occur and they affect everyone differently. For example, cancer. One lady's husband was undergoing chemo treatments and she was felt very helpless, so she decided that she would engage herself in a project that she had never done before, so she decided that she would start sewing. She realized that she really enjoyed this hobby and began to take sewing projects with her to the hospital. That way, when times got hard, she was able to take her mind off the fact that she could not help. Quilts and sewing has been used in the classroom in many ways, such as the curriculum. For example, math, English, and history. And then family and consumer sciences has also been a way for sewing to be used in the classroom. For example, we have family and consumer science classes here in Willow Springs High School, and they have one class where you do a sewing project. And I'm an intern in the 8th grade facts class right now, and we are in the middle of our sewing unit. Each student has always came up to me and said, Lindsay, I've really enjoyed working at the sewing machine and learning how to sew because it's something I did not know before. When you think of sewing, you probably think of the invention of the sewing machine, like I said earlier. Before I started my project in August, I had no idea when it emerged. And so finally, after conducting my research, I did. I also lacked the knowledge of sewing because I felt as if sewing was a life skill. So I decided for my senior project, like I mentioned earlier, that I would make a t-shirt quilt. My t-shirt quilt has 9 major steps and took me over 40 hours to complete. The first step would be measuring. I had to measure each t-shirt into 12 by 12 squares. As you can see in this picture, I'm using a template to mark my marks before I begin to cut. Each t-shirt had to be cut in the same spot of my marks. Not only was I cutting the t-shirts, but I was also cutting interfacing to go on the back of t-shirts. Interfacing goes on the back of t-shirts and is iron-on. This is a great way to prevent the shirt from stretching, even though it's not always the best solution. Next would be my placement. There was a way that I wanted each t-shirt to be. I didn't want FCCLA to be in one corner and FFA in another. So I chose to put each organization in a row. Next, I began my sewing. I had to sew all the rows together, so I took t-shirt 1 and flipped t-shirt 2 over, sewed a seam, and continued to do that for all 7 rows. Once I finished with each row, I took row 1 and row 2, flipped row 2 on top of row 1, and sewed my seam. This allowed me to create the top of my quilt, and then it was time to go to the quilt stretcher. The quilt stretcher, as you see in this picture, has 3 designated rollers for each piece of fabric. After I got all my fabric rolled up on the quilt stretcher, I was ready to roll out my rows so I could begin my ties. I went with a pattern of 4 ties per t-shirt and 2 on the outside border. When I tied, I was taking a needle and string to go through all 3 layers. I was not only going through the top, but the batting. As for the batting, I used a blanket that had been passed down to me, so it had some more meaning to me, and then the back of the quilt. And then again, 2 ties on the outside border. Next, I was ready to sew my border. I had left enough fabric on the back of the border so there was enough so I didn't run out and have a big mess at the end. So I was able to measure it, cut it, and then I pinned it so I was ready to sew my final seams. As you can see here, I'm sewing my final seams. This is probably the most challenging part of my project because I'm so small and my quilt was so large. It's actually a queen size quilt, and I could not push it through the sewing machine with it sitting on my lap. So underneath the quilt is a ironing board that helped me hold my quilt together, or hold my quilt. And then finally, this is my completed project and me with it. And then as you can see, it's over there to my left. So the most important decision that I had to make while completing my project would be my t-shirt decision. If you know me, you know I'm very involved in extracurricular activities, being FCCLA, FFA, and cheerleading. Through these organizations, I have been able to travel many places, such as Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C., and to Orlando, Florida. So without a doubt, these t-shirts were going to be on my t-shirt quilt. But ever since I was a freshman, I decided that I would collect a t-shirt quilt or a t-shirt And then here I am 3 years later using it for my senior project. Next would be the additional 5. This consists of 5 t-shirts that I made with vinyl and a Cricut. I used the back of t-shirts that I had maybe used the front of, and then got on my Cricut and typed up my name, graduation year, class song, class motto, and class flower. And then printed them out and ironed them to the t-shirts. My name, graduation year, class song, and class motto are in all 4 corners of my t-shirt quilt, and my class flower, the sunflower, is in the middle. And then finally, the border. I, again, took the back of t-shirts that I had used the front of, or the front of t-shirt, or the front of t-shirts that I maybe had used the back of to make my border. I did make 12 by 12 squares and cut them in half to make my rectangle border. In every project, there was expected to be challenges, and some challenges that I faced was working with the t-shirt material. I had never worked with t-shirt material before, and it's very difficult to work with because of how stretchy it is. Even though I did put interfacing on the back of t-shirts, it was still hard for me to work with. Next would be the mistakes. As you can see, my seams are not even or perfectly straight. And I'm okay with that because I could have took my t-shirts to someone and said, would you please make this for me? But instead, I decided that I would make it myself because the t-shirts meant so much to me and this quilt meant so much to me. And then when I was sewing my final seams, I misread one of my guide marks and moved my quilt over 1/4 of an inch too far, and my seam was over too far when I completed. So I took a seam ripper and ripped out every single stitch that I had made and redid it. And again, the same problem happened. So it took me 3 times before I finally got it right. And it was a lot of work, but these challenges allowed me to grow and allowed me to learn more about sewing. In conclusion, I am very proud of my senior project of making a t-shirt quilt because before I researched before I did my research, I had only had 2 instances of me sewing. One was when I was in 8th grade and sewed a pillowcase, and the second was me in 9th grade when I sewed a baby blanket. That was my only experience sewing, so this was a very big project that I took on, and I could not be more proud of the final product of my senior project. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions? Yes, Ms. Barry?
Did you have to do any hand sewing, or did you primarily use?
Yes. So mostly it was all the sewing machine. What I really had to do was all the ties by hand. And it was very difficult because my thread or string could only be so long, so I was constantly rethreading my needle.
What would you say the amount of time you have in that quilt?
It took me over 40 hours to complete, and that's not all the time that I documented because there was just times where I was just trying to figure out how I wanted my quilt top to look like for the final product.
So will you ever make another one?
Yeah, that's what I've been asking all my practices, and I think I would make another quilt, but to say if it would be a t-shirt quilt, I'm not sure. And I don't know if it would be as big as my quilt is right now.
Somebody in your family quilt?
No one, they know how to sew, but to say they quilt, no ma'am.
So who taught you like how to thread the sewing machine?
Yes, I learned that in 8th grade and then again in 9th grade. So from 9th grade to 12th grade, I had never touched a sewing machine except for those 2 projects. So I kind of knew, but then like my mom and grandmother advised me when I started my project.
So where did you find the quilt stretcher then?
It was my mentor's, Bonnie Wood.
Okay.
So we had a snow day and I just went over to her house and worked on my quilt.
What made you decide to use interfacing instead of something else?
That was a suggestion of my mentor's. She just felt that that's the best way she had found to work on the back of t-shirts because she had just done a t-shirt quilt for her granddaughter and that was the way that she had done it and she advised me to do it as well. Any more questions?
Let's take, do you okay? Okay, and then we'll take them downstairs.
Do you want to hold it up? You got it.
Max, is it too cool in here or cool enough or
It's cooking.
it's, you want me to turn the air down a little bit? You look a little shiny there, so. Yeah, we won't start until 10 till, so you have classes. Okay. And I do need a picture of you with a tripod for the paper. Get that, run that ball, and take some pictures.
Do I see okay?
Stand by your tripod and all. You can stand on each side of it and take a couple of pictures. A little bit closer, just a little bit closer. Do you want to come up here and take some pictures too? Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Switch sides. A little bit. Okay, the session ID is 98 for this session. Let's wait a couple more minutes because if somebody's watching the live stream, that way they'll be on time for you.
Okay.
You might try out the clicker. Lindsay had a little bit of trouble with it, so you kind of have to hold it up a little high and kind of point it that direction.
Are my judges ready? I remember a dark and stormy day. Everybody was at home. Me, my brothers and I, were crowded around my mom. My mom pulled out a box of seashells and tasked us each with making an animal out of these seashells. Raising 4 boys with only a year or 2 between them is not an easy task, but my mother managed with the help of crafts and do-it-yourself activities. This here is me working on my senior project, and my 2 brothers, that's me, and my older brother Mark and younger brother Michael, giving me their expert opinion on how I should make it all turn out. Hello, my name is Maxim Petrovich Kirchinov, and I felt it's suitable for me to research and do a senior project oriented about crafting. Whenever somebody is passionate for something, they're already more interesting than their peer or colleague who has no such passion. That is one of the reasons I felt that I would do this senior project, because I was interested in crafts and my mother kept me crafting and busy with all this stuff since I was a young child. And I felt that my interest in this topic would interest other people as well. And as I've said, my mother really incorporated crafts into my life, whether I wanted to or not, but I enjoyed every bit of it. During this senior project, my problem-solving skills were constantly at use. I could not do a bit of it without figuring, would this work best, would this work best? Why did I do this? So, this quote by Phyllis McGinley, a famous American author, states, "A hobby a day keeps the doldrums away." Doldrums, being a state of depression, comes whenever somebody is not actively doing something. And I feel that Phyllis McGinley was onto something, because while I was working on my senior project, I felt that I could focus on that instead of thinking about all the things that stress me out at school or even in my personal life. There are many benefits to having a hobby. One such benefit is improved physical health. For example, if the hobby is a physical activity, there's the quite easy connection to make. Physical activity equals better physical health. It also improves mental health. No matter if it's a creative hobby or just a disciplined hobby, it helps the brain focus on one thing and forget about everything else. This also proves true to improve emotional stability. Some people are emotionally unstable and they need something to focus on so they don't have to focus on their emotions that are distracting them. each person has a personality that is distinctly different from everybody else. And a hobby just adds on to that personality and enriches it. A hobby can be anything that a person enjoys. One such hobby could be any physical activity. Another hobby can be enjoying nature, such as the great outdoors, like hiking or skiing. That sounds really fun. Caring for a pet, which is, again, that focus thing. You have to focus on taking care of this pet, make sure your goldfish don't die, make sure your dog doesn't make a mess in the living room. Some people are social butterflies like me, and they like socializing. And whenever they're doing what they love, they find other people that are doing what they love as well. And the route I took with my senior project is obviously the crafting and do-it-yourself hobby. And I feel that all of the things that have happened in my life led up to this moment. My childhood heavy with crafts, my classes in Russian 1 through Russian 7, or whatever Sergey has me in now. We were constantly crafting in those classes, and I've done many crafts, and I felt that this would be something I could do. Creative hobbies is obviously what I did with my senior project. And after getting my cell phone in high school, I felt that I didn't have enough time to read as much now. And I didn't have the time to do stuff I loved, like going outside biking, catching lizards as a little boy. I really enjoyed doing all that stuff. But once I got a phone, once I got into high school, once I started doing these projects on the computer, once I started working with a calculator, it kind of took away from me a hobby that I really enjoyed, which was reading. And I needed something to exercise my brain, stimulate my brain, other than a computer or a gadget. Whenever I was doing my project, I was focused on making sure I did it right. Didn't always turn out right, which I had to go back and fix it. But it took my mind off of things that made me stress out, and I believe I was in a state of relaxation while I was doing my project. Most of my senior project is completely original, and I believe I have expressed myself better than I could have with words through crafting. My project, okay, so this is what really gets me. I was not planning on doing a matchstick house for my senior project. In fact, I was planning on doing something with beekeeping. But after Sam Chaney, I feel, stole the project from me when he made his beehive, I decided to do something completely different because I'm an individual, as is everybody else, and I didn't want to follow in somebody's footprints. I've spent most of my childhood in crafts, and after entering high school, I didn't really have that much time to focus on stuff like this. And I wanted to revisit those old memories that I've had with my family. People that have a passion for something, they are interesting, and I felt that I was interesting, and the project is really interesting. You may not see it in my project because there are massive castles out of matchsticks out there, and although my matchstick house doesn't match, pun intended, the grandeur of their matchstick castles, I've had an immense amount of fun while doing this project. I've got many comments like, how did you get away with doing something so easy? And why didn't I get away with doing something so easy? From people, from my peers, who felt that this was a really easy project. However, I also thought that this was going to be an easy project. I'm going to get in there, get it done. No. I've had many challenges and stretches throughout the entire crafting process, which was surprisingly not time management. My mom and grandma were really worried about me procrastinating and getting to senior night with a half-finished project, which is obviously not the case. My major challenge was deciding on which method to use. My first method was great, but it was just not applicable at a larger scale. My second method did not really reflect what my senior project proposal stated, so I had to scrap that one as well. And I ended up with this product where I used larger matchsticks to make sure that the walls didn't sway back and forth. Another major challenge that I've ran into while doing my senior project is the technological aspect. I had to figure out how to make a 3D model on a computer without any prior knowledge. I've had two mentors that had knowledge about AutoCAD programming, but the program I chose, they had no clue how to work it, and I had to figure out the controls on the program all by myself. And I thought it would be like, I'll just watch a tutorial video and it'll just come together by itself. No, every single time I sat down to work on it, I'd accidentally learn something new. It wasn't an option not to. And this here is a screenshot of Tinkercad, the program I used to build my senior project. And the fun thing about Tinkercad is if you don't name your senior project something, they'll automatically do it for you, which I won't even try to pronounce. Maybe it was nostalgia that pushed me to do this senior project. Maybe it was that I was genuinely fond of crafts throughout my entire life. I've had an immense amount of fun during the process, and I am really grateful to the people that have supported me throughout the entire process of it. And a huge shout out to both of my mentors, Mr. Hummel and Mr. Jackson, who stayed with me late after school and came in early in the morning to make sure that my project came out just the way it should. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions?
What do you plan to do after high school?
I feel I'm a really creative student, and I really like kids, so I'm thinking of being a kindergarten or a first grade teacher.
So what do you use to hold all your matchsticks together?
Wood glue,
Wood glue.
because glue gun doesn't look nice.
How long did it take you to build the whole?
30 plus hours. It was quite the task.
So were you worried going into this? I mean, one of the things is for you guys to have a stretch that you were comfortable doing crafts and stuff. What made this the stretch that it was for you?
Well, deciding on the method was really frustrating because I decided on a method, I'd build a small model and make sure that it works out. And then trying to build it on a larger scale, it doesn't work out, so I have to start all over again. I start another one, which it gets shot down because it doesn't reflect my senior project proposal. I have to start all over again. It's just making sure that I stick to my senior proposal and make sure that it looks nice. That was my stretch.
Is your house a replica of something that you've seen before, or did you just create this your own self?
I saw a picture of a craft that looks similar to mine, but I used most of my ideas are my own. And the open roofway, that's just like I thought it'd be cool to sleep on your attic at night, and that's why I left it open. I didn't feel like closing it up.
Not having any walls.
Well, there's walls on the bottom. And then,
But no,
I didn't want
that'd be
walls.
cool. That'd be cool.
I didn't want walls. Any more questions?
Do you know how many matchsticks you have in that?
There's approximately 200 to 300 large cooking matchsticks. There's a lot. And some of them were wasted because I broke them at the wrong part. I cut them at the wrong part. I glued them together and then it didn't turn out, so that had to go to waste. So, but I've had lots of fun doing this entire thing. So.
And how much would something like that cost?
Honestly, I don't think I'd sell that because all the time and effort I put into it.
But
I
if
don't
someone
think-
went to buy the materials.
The materials?
To make themselves.
Well, matches are really expensive, but we just happen to have some matchsticks left over. But don't buy matchsticks that are of the kitchen size because those are too overpriced. Go with popsicle sticks because those are reasonably priced and you don't have to cash out a lot. Any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
I didn't even think about it.
I really appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your presentation.
Really appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, your mother.
Yes. Yeah, you can tell because she has the phone up. I'll be nice to you.
He is very outgoing. Kids will love him. Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
And then we would like to have the Untitled board set up tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, that's
If
fine.
you'll just make it up in here.
Who would I leave on my house?
Do you trust me with it, or would you rather like Mr. Hummel?
I'd rather Mr. Hall.
Okay.
No, you have a closet.
I do have one, but it won't fit on the, it won't fit.
I don't trust the students.
Okay, because I let them run amok in my room. So, is he still here?
I'm pretty sure, because he has my stuff in there.
Oh, okay,
It'll be
okay,
really
yeah,
bad.
so why don't you leave your board in here, and
Okay.
then we'll have him come down and set up the match day.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem, thank you.
And I'm free to go, right?
You are free.
Not that hard.
Finished with your presentation.
Thank you, guys.
It was nice to meet you. It's his immediate graduation. And set up this way. Oh, there it is. So when you play, you kind of have to point it in that direction and, yeah, and hold it up a little bit. Okay. I'm going to, I need to take a picture of the board. Turn to the left, so this is Kelly. I should keep this in Mrs. Kelly's place. Sit where you like. Okay, take a picture of the home. Somebody else coming? Okay, turn the light on. Is it too cool in here or not cool enough? Uncomfortable? Okay, I'm gonna get a couple of you on each side. Okay, I'll count. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Switch lights for me. And a little bit closer. Oh, I don't want that light. Okay. One. One. Two. One. Just a little bit closer. One, two. And then I want to get kind of a close up of this sensor. I'm going to start for about another 3 minutes. I'm going to try to figure out to make sure you. And the session I gave for this one is 99. Oh, there you go. Is that right?
No, yes. I wish it.
Are my judges ready? On my family's forage beef cattle operation, one of the hardest challenges we face is measuring the quantity and quality of the forages we produce to reach optimum stocking density of our herds with a managed intensive grazing system. Hello, my name is Grant Kelly, and I have been fortunate enough to work and help take care of my family's farm that has helped to take care of my family for now 5 generations. One of the biggest challenges that I face is knowing that I wanted to do something with agriculture. However, agriculture is such a broad field of opportunity. I needed something that was doable within a very short amount of time. Something that I knew enough about to not go in completely blind, but not so much that I was unable to gain anything through this project. One of the biggest challenges for farmers as a whole across the globe is feeding more people with less resources and creating fewer emissions. In 1940, the approximate person was able to feed 19 people, and today it's sitting about 165 people per farmer per year. And with an expected population of 9 billion people by the year of 2050, there is more need for farmers to be able to grow more with less. There are approximately 1,000 to 1,200 marketers of grass-fed beef across the United States, and they are hard to come by in some parts of the United States. However, there are 8.9 billion acres across the globe used for the production of livestock. This is mostly because they are part of a grass-fed, grain-finished portion of raising cattle. And the grain comes from the 4.4 billion acres of which are used in livestock production of grain. Grain-fed beef, for example, has many pros and cons. Grain-fed beef, also known as grain-finished beef, it has a faster return, and for farmers, profit is a high portion of what keeps the farm running. And when you have a faster return of about 18 months from calving to sending them to slaughter versus 24 months to 2.5 years on a or on a grass-fed animal, excuse me. This is one example of why more people use this style than the grass-fed. It's also more readily available as there are more farmers that are using this style of raising animals than the just strictly grass-fed. And when profit is one of the biggest factors that keeps a farm running, segmentation of ownership helps to keep everyone getting profit. The same animal from calving to slaughter is most, if not all the time, not kept on the same farm during that time period. It is sold to one or more people from the farmer. There's also some negatives. For example, there's less profit potential because there's so many more people out there that are using it. A producer cannot simply have a marketer raise their prices and expect to get the same amount of customers as they had when the average price was met. Another big part of this is public misinformation. And one of the biggest parts of this is growth hormones. The National Beef Research Council of America found in a study over the claims that growth hormones, which are 97% estrogen, are creating early onset puberty in younger adults. They found that the adult female produces about 5 million nanograms of estrogen daily, whereas your average 8-pound hamburger consists of about 2 nanograms of estrogen. They, in doing the study, found that it would take approximately 3 million hamburgers consumed daily to reach the same amount of estrogen as an adult female produces daily. There are many positives and negatives to grass-fed beef as well. For example, it's more natural because it is only raised on one thing in its forages. And because this is one thing that draws many people to it, is this is how they were raised thousands of years ago, and this is what people believe is the only way they should be raised. There's a higher profit margin because there are less producers and there's more of a demand than there is a supply. However, this is also a negative because there's not enough supply for the demand, which can make it harder, especially in some parts of the United States where it is unavailable at all, to meet the needs and demands of people. There's a lack of market with the less consistent product, which does decrease the profit made, which is why there are a lot more, which is another reason why there's a lot more people who use the grain-fed or grain-finished regime. For my product, I wanted to see if I could solve one of my family's challenges on the farm. And with this, I created a sensor to measure the grass height. And in doing so, I decided that I was going to do a secondary test. So I marked out 2 plots of land and covered one with a tarp and fertilized the ground because I wanted to see how the fertilizer, which we believed does increase the growing rate and amount that it grows in the same amount of time, that as the unfertilized, I used as my control that received no fertilizer, and these plots are the same size, and I used the winter wheat forage. I then fertilized the ground and uncovered this as to make sure there were no other factors that decreased the chances of the survival of one over the other. I found in doing this that fall grass starts slower, at least it did last year, with the less than amazing weather conditions we had last year. We had little rain during this portion, at least in the beginning, and it was cooler temperatures, which does make it harder for this grass to take off. I also found that the fertilizer that we placed on there, as we did believe, does help. And after the third week of growing, my first week of measuring, I found that it was approximately an inch taller, the fertilized was, than the non-fertilized. And as you can see here, I had some troubles with my sensor and I became frustrated easily with it at times. Instead of using solid copper wire as I should have been able to use, I did not have any at my availability. So I had to make do with stranded copper wire, which did not fit into the ports as easily as the solid copper wire did. So I had to rewire the entire sensor because it was throwing error messages that it was either being shorted out because the wires would not go down to the ports and were connecting with other wires, or that for example, the SD card that you can introduce to it was not reading at all. And then when I had all of this figured out and my data stored on my SD card, my computer went through a stage where it deleted all of the data off of my computer. Thankfully, it was saved onto my SD card, and I was able to reproduce these, but it did set me back on quite a bit of time. One of the biggest problems of our generation is the feeding of 9 billion people by the year of finding a way to feed these 9 billion people by the year of 2050. And I feel that in doing this, even just my small part on my 5th generation farm, that I was able to, I hope I'm better able to help others understand the need for more consistent testing of our grasses to make sure that we are treating them correctly and are using them to the fullest. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions?
Do you raise grass-fed beef on your farm exclusively, or?
We do not. We raise the grass-fed and then we finish them on grain.
And what exactly does your tool do?
It uses sonar technology and catches the nearest flat object, which for example was the grass height, and it measures in time how fast it comes back, and then that figured
So you held it up here and it
Yes.
measured from a
Yes.
certain, how did you make sure that?
I had a stick that I had attached to it, and I had to rewire it on this end and was unable to keep the stick to it.
Where'd you get that idea?
I was touring Mizzou for a college visit and met with a professor who was actually installing a bigger version of this onto a drone to measure crop height. And he was interested in the way we do things down here, which is more cattle. And when I mentioned we had an intensive grazing system, he perked up immediately. Would you like to try this out? And he got me a list of parts, and I got them and was able to put it together.
I just recently saw something similar, but it was like $2,000 to purchase.
That cost me about $35.
Is it battery operated?
Yes,
or-
it runs off a 9-volt battery. Are there any more questions?
Is there someone who's going to set your sensor up, or would you rather us just handle this one?
probably just have.
Okay.
Because it's hard to,
I just don't want to tear it.
Yeah. it's hard with these wires that pop out at every given opportunity. I didn't know I didn't. Drew further.
She said. Oh.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
She's pretty much helping in here.
Turn that up 1 degree.
My nose is frozen.
Mine too, but you know, they're in suits.
But I know, and that's why I'm like, I can manage it. Let's see. And we're okay on the ordinary as far as the whole.
As long as it's okay with Kylie.
Let me get my size.
Mrs. Cochran, she needs to, like, during her presentation, she'll need to come over here. Can you see this end of the table, or do we need to move the table closer?
I think we need to move the table
Okay.
closer if we can.
Tell me when.
Yeah, it's in there.
And then I need pictures of you when you get your board set up on paper. So maybe a couple pictures of you on each side of it, and I'll count. Okay. 1, 2. 1, 2. Switch sides. Let's move that forward just a little bit. I just don't like the way that's falling. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1. Here's the last presentation. Can you get ready to present? And Kylie's session ID, when you get ready to switch to the next boarding guide, is session 100. You might try your cooker. Let's see, where it is. What do you think? Surely you did better. Oh, no, it's good. That would be. And you kind of have to hold it up and point it toward you.
I can just go whenever I'm ready. Okay. Are my judges ready? A 20-year-old mother was in her home with her baby while somebody was trying to break into her home. She owned a firearm, but she knew that if she shot him, she could potentially be charged for murder. She called 911 and was informed that the police were on their way. However, she knew that they would not make it in time. Hello, I'm Kylie Innes, and today I'll be talking about the constitutional right to own a firearm. Although many believe that this is a topic of controversy, the founding fathers of the United States gave the American citizens this right. In the Second Amendment, it states that the citizens have the right to own a firearm. In 2010, in the McDonald versus Chicago Supreme Court case, the court ruled that the right to own a firearm is protected by the Second Amendment as well as the 14th. Richard Henry Lee stated in his book, Letters from the Federal Farmer 53, that to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. George Washington believed that a free people ought not only be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. In William Rawls' 1825 reference book, A View of the Constitution of the United States of America, he states that no clause in the Constitution could by any rule of construction be conceived to give Congress a power to disarm the people. Despite this right, many court cases have been conducted regarding the Second Amendment right. In 2008, in the District of Columbia versus Heller case, the court ruled that the American citizens have the right to bear arms, especially in instances such as self-defense within the home. And also, as stated in the amendment, they have the right to form a well-regulated militia. In both the DC versus Heller cases and the McDonald versus Chicago case, both have the right to bear arms. They're represented in there. However, the court decided that the states should be allowed to make their own gun laws as long as the federal laws are followed. For my product, I applied my right as an American citizen to possess a firearm, and I reloaded ammunition for my father's .308 Winchester rifle, and I shot at a competition with those reloaded rounds. So here I am reloading, and to start off with, I had my 50 cases, which are here, or over there. I had them in that little green box. They had been used before, but this is a clean case. This has never been used before, but the ones that I had been used. And whenever you fire around, the brass expands, so this part will get longer. And whenever I started, I had to measure every individual case to make sure that it was the correct length. And if it wasn't, I had to trim it, which is why there are shavings here. And to measure them, I had to use a tool like this, and it just slides out right here, and the case goes in here, and then you measure it like that. So after I did all 50 of those, I had to pop the old primers out, which they go in the bottom right here.
So I had to pop all those out. And I had to, this tool right here has these little dies that screw into the top, which is what that is. So those pop all the primers out. After I did that, I had to put new primers in, which I didn't bring that tool, but it's just a little handheld thing where the case slides in and you put the new one in. And after that, the powder goes in, which is in the middle picture. And after that, the bullet goes in, which is what I'm doing in that far picture. And that's another die that goes in right here. And that, yeah, okay. So my competition was held on October 20th, 2018. We shot at 600 yards and I scored a 33 out of 50 on my actual score target. For like target practice, I didn't use my reloaded rounds just to preserve them so I could use them for scoring. I used factory rounds for just practicing. It was windy that day, and shooting at 600 yards, it can move the bullet quite a ways if you're not careful, so I used the factory rounds for target practice. I had challenges along the way. So I was originally supposed to shoot at Big Piney in Houston on the 20th, but if I would have, my mentor would not have been able to attend because that shoot was scheduled for later in the day and he had to leave to go to an event, so he wouldn't have been able to be there. Also, I had never reloaded before my project. I'd always watched my dad do it, but I had never done it, so I thought this would be a good opportunity for that. And I'd also never shot in a competitive environment before. I'd always shot for hunting purposes. That 20-year-old mother in her home ended up shooting that man after he successfully broke into her home. She was not charged for murder, though, because her life, as well as her baby's, was in danger. The founding fathers of the United States gave us American citizens the right to bear arms and to form a well-regulated militia when necessary. Thank you. Do my judges have any questions?
Did you already have all those tools, or did you have to?
My mentor had them, and he let me borrow them, which in those pictures, I'm at his house.
What's the cost versus buying factory or reloading?
Like in the long run, it's cheaper to like reload. I'm not sure what the exact amount, but you have to purchase powder and well, you can use like the cases that are bought through factory. But I don't. I buy like my own cases, like fresh cases, I guess. And then bullets, you have to buy those separately. I'm not sure how much it all costs like all together. But factory, like just going and buying a box is cheaper than buying like all this stuff at one time for reloading.
About how much time did it take you to do the 50 rounds?
We broke it up into 5 different like days, and altogether it took 15 hours, which was my mentor hour requirement. And doing just like lubricating them and popping the primers out took a long time, and like loading the bullets in didn't take very long, maybe an hour, hour and a half, but taking like lubricating them and then popping the primers out took a while, like 2, maybe 3 hours.
Which do you think makes you the most nervous in shooting at a competition, or when you're looking at a deer or a turkey or whatever it is that you're going to get ready to shoot it?
I think probably like the adrenaline rush before you shoot like a deer or something. That's.
Do you hunt?
Yes, I do.
Is that it?
Do you feel strongly about your Second Amendment rights?
I do. Yes. Okay. Thank you, guys.